I am Judith Miller, a 68-year-old widow enjoying what should have been my golden years. After decades of hard work and careful saving with my late husband Franklin, I thought I had everything figured out. My son Maxwell and his family were my world, and I never hesitated to support them financially when needed. How could I say no to the son I raised and adored? But last Tuesday, a single forgotten button on a phone changed everything. The words I overheard shattered my heart and forced me to question everything I believed about the people I loved most. Before I share what broke my heart that evening, tell me where you're watching from. Give this video a like if you've ever felt taken for granted by someone you love. The truth is, sometimes the people closest to us can be the ones who hurt us most. I grew up in a small town outside Cleveland, Ohio, where my father worked at the local factory and my mother stretched every dollar to feed our family of 5. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't comfortable either. I learned early on that money wasn't something to take for granted. My parents instilled in me the values of hard work, honesty, and financial responsibility. They sacrificed so much to put me through college, and I promised myself I would make them proud. It was during my sophomore year at Ohio State that I met Franklin Miller. He was studying engineering and worked nights at the campus library to pay his tuition. We connected immediately over our shared backgrounds and values. Franklin was brilliant, kind, and had the most infectious laugh that could light up an entire room. After graduation, we married in a simple ceremony in my parents' backyard, surrounded by family and friends. We started our life together with nothing but love, determination, and about $2,000 in savings. The early years were tough. Franklin worked his way up at an engineering firm while I taught elementary school. We lived in a tiny apartment, saved every penny we could, and postponed having children until we felt financially secure. When Maxwell was born 7 years into our marriage, it was the happiest day of our lives. We were determined to give him everything we hadn't had growing up, but also to teach him the same values our parents had taught us. Franklin and I built a good life over our 42 years together. We were never extravagant, but we were smart with our money. Franklin had an exceptional mind for investments, and as his career progressed, we were able to save substantially. We put Maxwell through college without him needing loans, helped him with the down payment on his first house, and still managed to build a retirement fund that would keep us comfortable. When Franklin died suddenly of a heart attack 6 years ago, I was devastated. After 4 decades together, I found myself alone for the first time since college. The grief was overwhelming, but I had to learn quickly how to manage on my own. Thankfully, Franklin had prepared for everything. Our financial affairs were in perfect order, and I inherited a substantial estate that, if managed properly, would support me for the rest of my life and still leave a significant inheritance for Maxwell and his family. Maxwell had grown into a successful marketing executive. He married Vanessa shortly after college, and they gave me 2 wonderful grandchildren, Ethan and Emma. Ethan is now 19 and studying business at his father's alma mater, while Emma is 17 and about to begin her senior year of high school. I adored those kids and tried to be present in their lives, especially after Franklin passed away. I never remarried after Franklin. My friends encouraged me to date, but my heart wasn't in it. Instead, I focused on family and volunteer work. I bought a comfortable condo closer to Maxwell's family in the suburbs of Chicago, joined a book club, took up watercolor painting, and spent as much time as possible with my grandchildren. Life was different without Franklin, but it was still good. After Franklin died, I noticed a change in my relationship with Maxwell. He began calling more often, which at first warmed my heart. But gradually, those calls started to include casual mentions of financial difficulties or unexpected expenses. First, I was happy to help. When Ethan got accepted to college, I offered to cover his tuition before Maxwell even asked. When their roof needed replacing after a severe storm, I wrote a check without hesitation. That's what family does, I thought. But over the last 2 years, the requests became more frequent and for larger amounts. Maxwell talked about investment opportunities, business ventures, and unexpected expenses. Each time I would transfer the money, trusting that my son was being honest with me. Franklin and I had always planned to help Maxwell during our lifetime anyway, so why wait? I dismissed the occasional whisper of doubt, attributing it to my own insecurities about aging. That particular week in April, I was looking forward to our monthly family dinner scheduled for the upcoming Saturday. I always cooked Maxwell's favorite pot roast, and Emma would bring her latest art project to show me. I had been feeling a bit lonely and was eagerly anticipating the company. In fact, I had been considering surprising them with a visit on Friday afternoon. Emma had a dance recital that evening, and though Maxwell hadn't mentioned it to me, I had seen it on Emma's social media. I thought how nice it would be to show up unexpectedly and watch my granddaughter perform. Little did I know that my world was about to turn upside down, and that the family dynamic I had cherished for so long was built on a foundation far less solid than I had believed. Tuesday evening found me in my kitchen, preparing a simple dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables. The radio played softly in the background, a classical station that Franklin and I had always enjoyed together. I still set the table for two sometimes, a habit I couldn't seem to break even after 6 years. I was just checking the chicken when my phone rang. Maxwell's smiling face appeared on the screen. "Hi, Mom," he said when I answered, his voice carrying that warm, affectionate tone that always made me smile. "How are you doing tonight?" "I'm just fine, sweetheart. Making some dinner." "How are Vanessa and the kids?" Maxwell launched into updates about the family. Ethan had aced an important exam. Emma was excited about her upcoming dance recital. Vanessa had been promoted at her interior design firm. The conversation flowed easily as it always did, and for a few minutes, I felt that familiar connection that had always defined our relationship. Then, after about 15 minutes of pleasant chat, Maxwell's tone shifted slightly. "So, Mom, something interesting came up today." I recognized that opening line. It had preceded many financial requests over the past few years. A colleague of mine tipped me off about an incredible investment opportunity. It's in tech, very solid company with exponential growth potential. The minimum buy-in is $50,000, but they're projecting returns of at least 20% within the first year. I felt a familiar twinge of unease. $50,000 was no small sum even for me, and this would be the third investment opportunity Maxwell had brought to me this year alone. "That sounds like quite an opportunity," I said carefully, sliding my dinner into the oven. "But $50,000 is a lot of money, Maxwell. What happened to the money for that real estate venture last month?" There was a brief pause before Maxwell responded, his voice taking on a slightly defensive edge. "That's still in progress, Mom. These things take time to mature. But this new opportunity is time-sensitive. We'd need to move on it by the end of the week." "I don't know, honey. I've been helping out quite a bit lately. Maybe we should sit down with my financial advisor and discuss some of these investments. Thomas could give us some professional insight." "We don't have time for that," Maxwell said quickly. "This opportunity won't wait. Look, I wouldn't bring this to you if I didn't think it was a sure thing. I'm putting my own money in too." We talked for a few more minutes, with Maxwell becoming increasingly insistent. I finally agreed to think about it and call him back the next day. We said our goodbyes and I heard Maxwell say, "Talk to you tomorrow. Love you, Mom." What happened next changed everything. I heard what sounded like Maxwell attempting to end the call, a fumbling noise, but the line remained open. I was about to hang up myself when I heard Maxwell's voice again, now with a completely different tone. "She'll think about it," he said, no longer speaking to me but clearly addressing someone else in the room. It must be Vanessa, I realized. "So she's not giving it to you right away?" I heard Vanessa's voice, distant but clear enough. "Not yet, but she will," Maxwell replied, and I froze at the sudden coldness in his voice. "Just tell her we love her, she'll pay. She always does." My hand tightened around the phone as I stood motionless in my kitchen. "Did you have to ask for so much?" Vanessa asked, her voice coming closer to the phone. Maxwell laughed, a sound utterly devoid of the warmth I was accustomed to. "Why not? The old fool never questions anything. 50,000 now, maybe 75 next time. It's all coming to us eventually anyway." I felt as though I'd been physically struck. Old fool? Was that how my son saw me? What about that financial advisor she mentioned? Vanessa sounded concerned. "She's been talking about him for months but never actually calls him. Besides, I can always tell her the opportunity fell through if she pushes it. We've done it before." "They done it before?" My mind raced back through all the investment opportunities, business ventures, and emergencies that had prompted my financial assistance over the years. Well, we need that money, Vanessa said. The down payment on the lake house is due next month, and I am not losing that property. Did you see the kitchen? It's exactly what I've been wanting. Don't worry about it, Maxwell assured her. Mom's good for it. She hasn't even touched her principal in all these years. Franklin left her loaded, and she lives like she's still on a teacher's salary. Thank God your dad was smart with money, even if your mom isn't, Vanessa replied with a laugh that sent chills down my spine. So, are we still on for Aspen this Christmas? I want to book the chalet before the good ones are gone. Absolutely. I'll tell Mom we're spending Christmas at home this year, tight budget and all that. She'll probably send a check as a gift. She always tries to solve everything with money. Well, it's working out great for us, Vanessa said. Oh, did you see Megan's new car? We cannot let the Johnsons show us up like that. Once we get this money from your mom, we should look at that new Mercedes you wanted. Already have my eye on one, Maxwell replied. Speaking of money, do you think we should start working on her about Ethan's study abroad program? Definitely. She loves the idea of him getting culture. We could probably get another $20,000 for that. Cancun isn't technically studying abroad, but what she doesn't know won't hurt her. There was more laughter, then the sound of movement. I should probably call her back tomorrow morning, catch her before she talks to anyone else, Maxwell said. You know how Barbara fills her head with suspicions. The call finally disconnected, presumably when one of them noticed the phone was still connected. But the damage was done. I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing but dial tone. The chicken in the oven began to smoke, setting off the fire alarm, but I barely noticed. With mechanical movements, I turned off the oven, opened a window and silenced the alarm. Then I sank into a chair at my kitchen table, the phone clattering to the floor. My son, my Maxwell, thought I was an old fool. A cash machine. Someone to manipulate and deceive. And his wife, the mother of my precious grandchildren, was his willing accomplice. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally moved again, my untouched dinner was cold, and the sky outside my window had grown dark. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Maxwell and Vanessa's words playing on an endless loop in my mind. Old fool. She'll pay. She always does. Each replay brought fresh waves of humiliation and pain. I thought of all the times I transferred money without question, happy to help my son and his family. The expensive golf clubs for Maxwell's birthday that he claimed he'd bought on sale. The family trip to Hawaii that they said was possible because of airline points. The kitchen renovation that supposedly cost half of what I now suspected was the truth. Had any of it been real? The loving phone calls, the family dinners, the thoughtful gifts? Or was I just the bank they occasionally had to make deposits of affection into in order to make withdrawals of cash? As the night deepened, my mind traveled back to earlier years. Maxwell as a little boy, his face lighting up when Franklin and I would cheer at his little league games. Maxwell as a teenager, working summers at the local grocery store to save for his first car. Even though Franklin and I had offered to buy one for him. When had my son changed? Or had I simply failed to see who he truly was all along? I thought of the sacrifices Franklin and I had made. The vacations we didn't take, the newer cars we didn't buy, the restaurants we rarely visited. All so we could save for the future, for our retirement, for Maxwell's education, for our eventual legacy to him. Franklin had been so proud of our financial discipline, and I had continued that careful stewardship after his death. For what? To be mocked behind my back by my own child? Around 3 a.m, I got up and went to my home office. With shaking hands, I pulled out the files where I tracked financial gifts to Maxwell and his family. College tuition for Ethan. Down payment assistance for their home. The roof. The unexpected tax bill. The startup investment. The opportunity in medical technology. The friend's business venture. The list went on, growing more frequent and larger in the past 2 years. Conservative estimate? Over $300,000. Dawn found me still at my desk, red-eyed and exhausted, but with a new clarity beginning to emerge through the fog of betrayal. I showered and dressed mechanically, made a pot of coffee and waited. Maxwell would call. He always did when money was involved. Sure enough, at precisely 9:30 my phone rang. "Good morning, Mom," Maxwell said cheerfully. "Hope I didn't wake you." "No, I've been up for hours," I replied, amazed at how normal my voice sounded when everything inside me was screaming. "I was thinking about what we discussed last night," he continued. "That investment opportunity. It really is time-sensitive and I'd hate for you to miss out. Shall I send you the wire information?" For a moment I considered confronting him immediately, telling him I had heard everything. But some instinct held me back. I wasn't ready yet. I needed time to think, to plan. "Actually, honey, I'm not feeling very well this morning," I said, the lie coming surprisingly easily. "I think I might be coming down with something. Can we talk about this in a day or two? Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" His concern sounded so genuine that for a fleeting second, I doubted what I had heard. But then I remembered, just tell her we love her, she'll pay. No, it's probably just a cold. But I should probably cancel our dinner this weekend. I wouldn't want to get the kids sick. Oh, was that disappointment in his voice, or relief? "Well, if you're sure, let me know if you need anything. And about that investment." "I'll call you when I'm feeling better," I interrupted gently. "We can discuss it then." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, and allowed the tears to come. I cried for the relationship I thought I had with my son. I cried for Franklin, grateful that he hadn't lived to see what our boy had become. I cried for my grandchildren, who were being raised by parents who saw deception as a family business model. And finally, I cried for myself, for my foolishness and blindness. When the tears subsided, I did what I always did in times of crisis. I called Barbara. My best friend since college, Barbara had been my rock after Franklin died. She had also, I now realized, gently tried to warn me about Maxwell's increasing financial requests. "Judith," she answered on the second ring. "What's wrong? You never call this early." The whole story poured out of me, including every painful detail of the overheard conversation. Barbara listened without interrupting, though I could hear her occasional sharp intake of breath. "Those ungrateful, manipulative." Barbara didn't finish the sentence. "I'm coming over. Right now." "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I absolutely do. Put on another pot of coffee. I'll bring bagels." An hour later, Barbara sat across from me at my kitchen table, her expression a mix of fury and compassion. "I've suspected something like this for a while," she admitted. "The frequency of their needs seemed too convenient. But I never imagined they were this calculated about it." "I feel like such a fool," I whispered. "You are not a fool," Barbara said firmly. "You're a mother who loved and trusted her son. Maxwell is the fool for abusing that trust. What do I do now?" Barbara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "First, you protect yourself, financially and emotionally. Then you decide what kind of relationship you want going forward, if any." By the time Barbara left that evening, my tears had given way to something harder, more resolute. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a sense of determination I hadn't felt in years. Maxwell had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated his mother. I went to bed early that night, emotionally drained but with a plan beginning to form. Maxwell and Vanessa had no idea what I had overheard. That gave me time. Time to investigate, to confirm, and to decide exactly how to proceed. They thought I was a helpless old woman, easily manipulated and controlled. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose that had been absent since Franklin's death. After breakfast, I returned to my home office and began a systematic review of every financial interaction I'd had with Maxwell and his family over the past 6 years. I created a spreadsheet, noting dates, amounts, stated purposes, and my own recollections of each transaction. The pattern was undeniable. What had started as occasional help with legitimate expenses had evolved into regular transfers of increasingly large sums, often with vague justifications about investments or opportunities that I never heard about again. I had attributed the lack of follow-up to Maxwell being busy, or the investments being long-term. Now I recognized it for what it was: a systematic campaign to drain my resources under false pretenses. On a hunch, I opened my laptop and navigated to Vanessa's Instagram page. I rarely check social media, finding it confusing and somewhat intrusive, but I knew she was active on several platforms. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. There was Vanessa, tagged at an exclusive spa in Arizona during the week Maxwell had told me they couldn't afford a vacation. There was Maxwell, proudly posing beside a new set of golf clubs far more expensive than the ones he'd claimed to buy on sale. There were the family photos from Hawaii, captioned "Living Our Best Life," with hashtags about luxury and privilege. And most damning of all, a recent post showing Vanessa standing in front of a lakefront property with the caption, "Soon to be our weekend getaway. Dreams do come true." The lake house they had been discussing. The one they needed my $50,000 to secure. My hands trembled as I continued scrolling through their digital lives. The designer clothes. The expensive restaurants. The lavish gifts they gave each other. All while coming to me with stories of tight budgets and missed opportunities. I closed the laptop feeling physically ill. But I wasn't done. I needed professional perspectives. Thomas Reynolds had been Franklin's financial advisor for 20 years, and had continued to manage our investments after Franklin's death. I had maintained the relationship but consulted him less frequently than Franklin had, trusting my husband's established plans. Now I wondered if that had been a mistake. "Mrs. Miller, this is a pleasant surprise," Thomas said when I was shown into his office later that day. "It's been, almost a year?" "Too long," I acknowledged, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I should have been more proactive about our regular meetings." Thomas smiled kindly. "Well, your portfolio hasn't needed much adjustment. Franklin set things up beautifully, and you've maintained his disciplined approach. Not many of my clients show such restraint." "That's actually why I'm here, Thomas. I need to discuss some concerns about recent financial decisions." Over the next hour, I outlined the pattern of financial help I'd been providing to Maxwell. Thomas listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Mrs. Miller, based on what you're describing, I'm concerned that you may be experiencing financial exploitation," he said carefully when I finished. "You mean elder abuse," I said flatly. Thomas winced slightly at the term. "It's a form of that, yes. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, especially from family members. The amounts you've described are substantial, and could impact your long-term financial security if the pattern continues. What should I do?" "First, I'd recommend immediately stopping any financial assistance until we've had a chance to thoroughly review your situation. Second, you might want to consult with an attorney about protecting your assets going forward." "Do you think I need to change my will?" I asked. Thomas hesitated. "That's a personal decision, but from a financial perspective, you might want to consider structures that provide more control over how your assets are used after your lifetime. A trust, for instance, rather than direct inheritance." I left Thomas's office with several referrals to estate attorneys and a lot to think about. But my investigation wasn't complete. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I searched online for information about financial elder abuse. The stories I read were heartbreakingly similar to my own. Children and grandchildren manipulating aging parents and grandparents. Caregivers exploiting those in their charge. Friends and neighbors taking advantage of vulnerability and trust. I didn't feel elderly or vulnerable. I was only 68, in good health, mentally sharp. But I had been vulnerable in other ways, through my love for my son and my desire to help him succeed. That was the vulnerability Maxwell and Vanessa had exploited so effectively. The next day brought the most difficult part of my investigation. I reached out to Craig Wilson, who had been Maxwell's best friend since high school. Craig had moved to Seattle years ago, but they had remained close, or so I thought. When Craig answered my call, his surprise was evident. "Mrs. Miller? Is everything okay? Is Maxwell all right?" "Maxwell is fine, Craig. I just wanted to catch up a bit. It's been too long." We chatted awkwardly for a few minutes before I carefully steered the conversation toward my son. "Maxwell mentioned you two had dinner when he was in Seattle for that business conference last month," I said casually. There was a pause. "Mrs. Miller, I haven't seen Maxwell in almost 3 years. He canceled the last 2 times he was supposed to visit Seattle." My heart sank. The Seattle business trip had been the reason for a $10,000 emergency, when Maxwell claimed his company had failed to reimburse some expenses. I see, I said slowly. I must have misunderstood. Is something wrong? Craig asked, concern evident in his voice. I hesitated, then made a decision. Craig, can I ask you something in confidence? Of course, Mrs. Miller. Have you seen Maxwell and Vanessa's social media lately? Their lifestyle. Another pause. Yes, he finally said. To be honest, it's been a point of confusion among some of his old friends. Maxwell always talks about financial struggles when we catch up by phone, but then posts about luxury purchases and vacations. A few of us have wondered. He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. Wondered where the money was coming from. I finished for him. Mrs. Miller, I don't want to speak out of turn. Maxwell is my friend. And you're loyal. I respect that. But I need to know the truth, Craig. Has Maxwell ever mentioned receiving financial help from me? The silence that followed told me everything before Craig even spoke. He's mentioned that you've been generous, he finally said. But he's also implied that it's expected. That it's his inheritance anyway, just coming early. Mrs. Miller, has something happened? I thanked Craig for his honesty and ended the call without elaborating further. Another piece of the puzzle confirmed. Maxwell wasn't just lying to me about money. He was creating an entirely fictional narrative about his life and finances, tailored to each audience. My final discovery came later that afternoon when I decided to check my email. I rarely used the account Maxwell had set up for me years ago, preferring to communicate by phone or text. But something prompted me to log in, and there I found an email notification for a credit card I shared with Maxwell. I had added him as an authorized user years ago for emergencies, but I rarely reviewed the statement since the balance was paid automatically from my account each month. The recent charges included restaurants I'd never visited, stores I'd never shopped at, and most disturbingly, a $3,000 deposit to Lakefront Properties LLC dated just 2 days ago. With trembling fingers, I downloaded the past year of statements. The total additional spending on my account for items that were clearly not mine was over $40,000. Then I found something that broke the last thread of doubt. A text message chain Maxwell had accidentally synced to my tablet through our shared Apple ID. Messages between him and Vanessa discussing their next approach. Maxwell. Mom seemed hesitant about the investment. Might need to play the grandkid angle. Vanessa. Tell her Ethan needs additional tutoring for his classes. She always responds to education needs. Maxwell, good idea. And we can work Mom's guilt about Dad. Say something about how he would have wanted to help. Vanessa, perfect. Get the money by Friday and we can make the second payment on the lake house. The timestamp was from the night before our phone call, the very conversation that had exposed their true intentions. I sat back in my chair, a strange calm settling over me. The pain was still there, the sense of betrayal acute, but now it was accompanied by clarity and resolve. I had been systematically deceived and exploited by my own son and his wife. They had counted on my love, my trust, and perhaps what they perceived as age-related vulnerability to fund their lifestyle. They had made a fundamental miscalculation. I was not the helpless, easily manipulated old woman they believed me to be. I was Judith Miller, who had worked and saved alongside Franklin for 42 years, who had managed a classroom of 30 elementary school children, with firm compassion for decades, who had survived the devastating loss of her beloved husband and rebuilt a life alone. And I was done being anyone's fool. The following morning, I called the law office Thomas had recommended and scheduled an appointment with Patricia Lopez, an attorney specializing in estate planning and elder law. She was able to see me that afternoon, and I arrived at her downtown office with a folder containing all my financial documentation, including the evidence of Maxwell and Vanessa's deception. Patricia was a petite woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I appreciated immediately. She listened attentively as I explained my situation, occasionally making notes but mostly just letting me talk. Unfortunately, Mrs. Miller, what you're describing is not uncommon, she said when I finished. The good news is that you've caught this relatively early before your financial security was seriously compromised. What are my options? I asked. Several, depending on what outcome you're hoping for, Patricia replied. Are you looking to recover the money that was taken under false pretenses? Or are you primarily concerned with protecting your assets going forward? I considered the question carefully. The money already given is less important to me than ensuring my remaining assets are protected and distributed, according to my wishes in the future. Patricia nodded. Then let's focus on restructuring your estate plan. You mentioned a will. Yes, fairly straightforward. Everything to Maxwell, with provisions for my grandchildren's education. I'd recommend a complete overhaul. A revocable living trust would give you more control over how your assets are distributed and used, both during your lifetime and after. Over the next 2 hours, Patricia outlined various options. I could create a trust for my grandchildren's education that neither Maxwell nor Vanessa could access. I could designate portions of my estate to charities or causes I cared about. I could establish conditions for any inheritance Maxwell might receive. What about my current finances? I asked. Maxwell has access to one of my credit cards as an authorized user. That should be addressed immediately, Patricia said. We should also review any financial powers of attorney or healthcare directives you may have in place. If Maxwell is currently your designated agent, you might want to reconsider. I left Patricia's office with a clear action plan and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week to sign new documents. My first step was obvious. As soon as I got home, I called my credit card company and reported my card as lost. This automatically canceled the old card, including Maxwell's authorized user card, and generated a new one that would be sent only to me. I also contacted my bank and removed Maxwell as a signatory on my checking account, another precaution Franklin had suggested years ago that now seemed terribly naive. Next, I called Barbara and asked if she would be willing to serve as my healthcare proxy and financial power of attorney instead of Maxwell. She agreed immediately. Are you planning to confront him? She asked. Yes, but not yet. I need to have everything in place first. The next day, I met with Thomas again to restructure my investments. We set up education trusts for Ethan and Emma that would pay their tuition and reasonable expenses directly to their schools, bypassing their parents entirely. We also identified several charitable organizations that aligned with Franklin's and my values, designating substantial portions of my estate to support their work. What about Maxwell? Thomas asked carefully. I had given this considerable thought. Despite everything, he was still my son. 10% of the estate, I decided. With conditions. The funds will be held in trust and distributed in annual installments, contingent on him not attempting to contest the will or otherwise interfere with the distributions to his children or the charities. Thomas nodded, making notes. It's fair. Generous, even given the circumstances. That afternoon, I had my first appointment with Diana Chin, a therapist specializing in family estrangement and elder issues. I had never considered therapy before, viewing it as something for people with real problems. Now I recognized that betrayal by one's child certainly qualified. What you're feeling is a complex grief, Diana explained after I shared my story. You're mourning the relationship you thought you had, as well as adjusting your understanding of your son's character. It's similar to the grief process following a death, but with the additional complication that the person is still present in your life. I feel so angry, I admitted. I've never been an angry person. Your anger is valid and appropriate, Diana assured me. It's a natural response to betrayal. The question is how you want to channel that anger. We spent the session discussing healthy boundaries and preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Maxwell. Diana suggested role-playing potential scenarios, which felt awkward at first but proved tremendously helpful. He'll try to deny it at first, Diana predicted. Then, when presented with evidence, he'll likely attempt to justify his actions or minimize them. Finally, he may resort to emotional manipulation, trying to make you feel guilty for questioning his love or intentions. How do I respond to that? With calm clarity about what you know, what you've decided, and what your boundaries are going forward. This isn't about punishing Maxwell. It's about protecting yourself and establishing a healthier relationship dynamic, if that's even possible. Over the next several days, I continued my preparations. I changed all my passwords, secured important documents in a safe deposit box, and made copies of the evidence I had gathered. I also began planning for the confrontation itself. Maxwell had called several times since our last conversation, increasingly insistent about the investment opportunity. I maintained my story about being under the weather, buying time to complete my arrangements. By Friday, 1 week after overhearing that devastating phone conversation, everything was in place. My new will and trust documents were prepared for signing. My financial accounts were secured. My credit card had been replaced. I had even begun researching senior living communities, not because I needed assistance but because I was suddenly drawn to the idea of a fresh start in a community of peers. That evening I called Maxwell. "Mom, feeling better? We've missed you." "Much better, thank you," I replied, amazed at how steady my voice remained. "In fact, I was thinking we should still have our family dinner this weekend. Are you all available tomorrow evening?" "Tomorrow? Sure, I think so. Let me check with Vanessa." I heard muffled voices as he presumably consulted with his wife. "We can make that work," he confirmed. "Should we bring anything?" "Just yourselves," I said. "I'm looking forward to seeing all of you." "Great. Oh, and Mom, about that investment opportunity we discussed. We can talk about everything tomorrow," I interrupted gently. "In person." After hanging up, I sat in my living room, looking at the family photos arranged on the mantel. Maxwell as a baby in Franklin's arms. Maxwell graduating from college, his father and I beaming beside him. Maxwell and Vanessa on their wedding day. Ethan and Emma at various ages. Was I doing the right thing? Would this confrontation destroy what family I had left? The doubts crept in, threatening the resolve I had built over the past week. Then my eyes fell on a particular photo, one of Franklin and me on our 40th anniversary. The love in his eyes as he looked at me was unmistakable, as was the strength in his stance. Franklin had been a kind man but never a weak one. He would be heartbroken by Maxwell's behavior, but he would not have countenanced it continuing. "I wish you were here," I whispered to his image. "But I think you'd be proud of what I'm about to do." I spent the rest of the evening preparing for the next day's confrontation. I selected the evidence I would present if necessary. I rehearsed what I would say, drawing on the practice sessions with Diana. I even prepared a small overnight bag, knowing I might need space after the confrontation and could stay with Barbara if necessary. As I finally went to bed, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The hurt remained, but it was no longer debilitating. I had taken back control of my life and my future. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would face it on my terms, not as a victim, but as a woman of strength and dignity. Maxwell and his family had no idea what was coming. They still thought they were dealing with a naive, easily manipulated old woman. By this time tomorrow, they would understand just how profoundly they had underestimated Judith Miller. Saturday arrived with a brilliant spring sunshine that belied the emotional storm brewing in my heart. I spent the morning preparing Maxwell's favorite meal, just as I had done countless times before. Pot roast with rosemary potatoes, fresh rolls, and apple pie for dessert. The familiar routine was comforting, helping to steady my nerves for what was to come. By 4:30 everything was ready. The table was set with my best china, the food was warming in the oven, and the folder containing printouts of my evidence sat discreetly on the sideboard. I had dressed carefully in a blue dress that Franklin had always loved, applied modest makeup, and even styled my hair. This wasn't vanity. It was armor. I needed to look and feel my strongest. At precisely 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. "Grandma!" Emma exclaimed, immediately wrapping me in a hug. Her enthusiasm was genuine, and I hugged her back tightly, reminding myself that my grandchildren were innocent in all of this. "We missed you last weekend," Ethan said, giving me a more reserved hug appropriate for his 19 years, but no less sincere. Maxwell and Vanessa followed, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. Their smiles seemed genuine too, which only reinforced how skilled they had become at their deception. "Mom, you look wonderful," Maxwell said, kissing my cheek. "Hard to believe you were under the weather just days ago." "These old bones bounce back quickly," I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Come in, all of you. Dinner's almost ready. The initial conversation flowed naturally as we settled in the living room. Emma talked excitedly about her dance recital, which I expressed disappointment at missing. Ethan shared news about his classes and a research project he was particularly excited about. I listened attentively, cherishing these moments with my grandchildren that felt untainted by the revelations of the past week. Vanessa complimented my home as she always did, though I now recognized the calculating assessment behind her gaze as she noted furnishings and decor. Was she mentally tallying their value? Imagining them in her possession someday? The thought sent a chill through me despite the warm spring evening. Shall we move to the dining room? I suggested after about 20 minutes. Everything should be ready. Dinner began pleasantly enough. The food was well received, with Maxwell declaring the pot roast even better than usual. The conversation remained centered on the children, for which I was grateful. I wasn't ready to engage directly with Maxwell and Vanessa just yet. As we were finishing the main course, however, Maxwell steered the conversation in the inevitable direction. "Mom, I wanted to follow up on that investment opportunity we discussed," he said, setting down his fork. "The window is closing fast, and I'd hate for you to miss out." "What investment is this, Dad?" Ethan asked with interest. Maxwell hesitated, clearly not having anticipated his son's question. "Just a private equity thing through a colleague," he said vaguely. "Nothing too exciting." "Actually," I said, my voice calmer than I felt, "why don't you tell Ethan about it, Maxwell? About the tech company with the projected 20% return? I'm sure as a business student he'd find it fascinating." Maxwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's complicated, Mom. Probably not something Ethan would understand yet." "Try me," Ethan said, looking between us curiously. An awkward silence fell over the table. Vanessa jumped in smoothly. "Emma, didn't you want to show your grandmother the photos from your recital?" Emma brightened. "Yes. Grandma, you should see the costumes. They were amazing." The moment passed, but I had seen the flash of concern in Maxwell's eyes. He knew something was different about this interaction. After dinner, I suggested the children might enjoy watching a movie in the den, while the adults had coffee in the living room. Once we were alone, Maxwell wasted no time. "So, Mom, about that investment. I really need an answer today. My colleague can only hold the spot until Monday." I took a deliberate sip of my coffee before responding. "You know, Maxwell, it's interesting. I don't believe you've ever given me the name of this company, or any documentation about the investment." "It's a private placement," he said quickly. "Very exclusive. The documentation is confidential until you commit." "That sounds unusual," I remarked. "Thomas has always advised me never to invest in something without thorough documentation up front." "Thomas," Vanessa said with a slight edge to her voice, "your financial advisor? I thought you hardly ever consulted with him." "I've been seeing quite a bit of Thomas this week, actually," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "We've had a lot to discuss." Maxwell and Vanessa exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Maxwell asked, concern coloring his voice. "With your finances, I mean?" "That depends on your definition of okay," I said. I set my coffee cup down carefully and looked directly at my son. "Maxwell, I know about the lake house." The color drained from his face so quickly it would have been comical under different circumstances. "What lake house?" he attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. "The one Vanessa posted about on Instagram. The weekend getaway you were planning to make a down payment on with the $50,000 you were asking from me." Vanessa's sharp intake of breath was audible in the suddenly silent room. "Mom, I can explain," Maxwell began. "Can you also explain the Seattle business trip that Craig Wilson knows nothing about? Or the charges to my credit card for restaurants and stores I've never visited? Or perhaps you'd like to explain why you refer to me as an old fool, who always pays when you think I can't hear you." Maxwell's expression shifted from shock to confusion, then to dawning horror as understanding hit him. "The phone call," he whispered. "Last week. I thought I hung up." "You didn't," I confirmed. "I heard everything, Maxwell. Everything." "Judith," Vanessa interjected, her voice taking on a placating tone that made my skin crawl. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Whatever you think you heard. There's no misunderstanding, I interrupted firmly. I heard you both quite clearly discussing how to manipulate me for money. I heard you laugh about spending my loans on luxury items. I heard you planning to use my grandchildren as pawns in your schemes. Maxwell seemed to recover somewhat, shifting strategies. Mom, you're taking things completely out of context. Yes, we were discussing the lake house, but it was going to be a family property, somewhere we could all enjoy together. Yet you never mentioned it to me, I pointed out. Instead, you invented a fictional investment opportunity to secure the down payment. We wanted it to be a surprise, Vanessa attempted weakly. Like the surprise trip to Hawaii? Or the surprise spa weekend in Arizona? Or perhaps the surprise new Mercedes you were planning to buy with my money? I reached for the folder I had placed on the side table and removed several printed screenshots from their social media accounts. You've both been very careless about documenting your spending habits online. Maxwell's expression hardened. So you've been spying on us? Going through our personal social media. Public social media, I corrected. The same posts you share with hundreds of so-called friends. And yes, after discovering I've been systematically deceived by my own son, I did some investigating. This is ridiculous, Maxwell said, standing abruptly. Vanessa, get the kids. We're leaving. Sit down, Maxwell, I said, my voice quiet but firm. We're not finished. Something in my tone must have reached him, because he slowly sank back onto the couch. What do you want, Mom? He asked, his voice a mixture of defiance and resignation. I want you to know what I've done this past week, I said. I've canceled the credit card you were an authorized user on. I've removed you as a signatory on my accounts. I've changed my will and established trusts for Ethan and Emma's education that neither of you can access. Vanessa made a choked sound, but I continued without acknowledging her. I've also designated a significant portion of my estate to several charitable organizations that your father and I always supported. The remainder, approximately 10%, will be held in trust for you, Maxwell, with specific conditions regarding your behavior toward me and your children. You can't do that, Vanessa blurted. Franklin wanted Maxwell to have everything. Franklin wanted his son to be an honorable man, I countered. He would be heartbroken to see what you've become. Maxwell's face flushed with anger. This is about control. You've always needed to control everything. Well, guess what, Mom? I'm a grown man. I don't need your approval or your money. Evidence suggests otherwise, I said dryly. But regardless, these changes have already been made. The documents will be signed Monday morning. We'll contest it, Vanessa said immediately. You can't just disinherit your only child. I haven't disinherited him. I've ensured that my assets will be used in accordance with my wishes and values. Any attempt to contest will result in Maxwell losing even the 10% I've allocated to him. Maxwell stood again, pulling Vanessa up with him. I don't know who's been filling your head with these ideas, Mom, but this isn't you. You're angry right now and you're not thinking clearly. We should all take some time to cool off. I've had a week to think very clearly, Maxwell. For the first time in years, perhaps. But you're right about one thing. I am angry. I'm angry that my son, who I have loved and supported his entire life, sees me as nothing more than a checkbook. I'm angry that you and your wife have laughed at me behind my back while taking my money. Most of all, I'm angry that you've taught my grandchildren, by example if not directly, that it's acceptable to deceive and manipulate people who love you. That's not fair, Maxwell protested. We've never involved the kids in any of this. Haven't you? What about the fictional study abroad program for Ethan that was actually going to be a trip to Cancun? Do you think they don't notice the disconnect between your words about financial struggles and your lavish spending? Before Maxwell could respond, the sound of a stifled sob came from the doorway. We all turned to see Emma standing there, her face pale and tear-streaked. Ethan stood behind her, his expression a mask of shock and dismay. Emma, Vanessa said quickly, go get your things. We're leaving. Emma didn't move. Is it true? She asked, looking directly at me. Did Dad and Mom lie to you to get money? I hesitated, caught between my desire for honesty and my instinct to protect my grandchildren. Your parents and I have some serious issues to work through, I said carefully. That's not an answer, Ethan said, stepping forward. His gaze shifted to his father. Dad, what's Grandma talking about? What investment? What lake house? Maxwell seemed at a loss for words, a rarity for him. Vanessa stepped in. This is a private matter between adults, Ethan. It doesn't concern you or your sister. It sounds like it does concern us, Ethan countered. Especially if you were planning to use our education as an excuse to get money from Grandma. The room fell silent as the full weight of the situation settled over us all. My heart ached for my grandchildren, caught in the crossfire of their parents' deception and my confrontation. I think, I finally said, breaking the tense silence, that we all need some time to process this. Maxwell, Vanessa, perhaps it would be best if you took the children home now. We can continue this conversation another time. There's nothing to continue, Maxwell said coldly. You've made your position clear and so have we. Come on, Vanessa. Kids. Ethan and Emma hesitated, looking between their parents and me with confusion and hurt in their eyes. It's okay, I told them gently. Go with your parents. I'm not going anywhere. We'll talk soon. Emma rushed to hug me, tears flowing freely now. I love you, Grandma, she whispered. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, I assured her, hugging her tightly. Nothing at all. Ethan approached more slowly, his expression troubled. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, giving me a brief but firm hug. Maxwell ushered his family out without another word to me, his back rigid with anger. The door closed behind them with a finality that sent a wave of grief through me. Despite my preparations, despite my resolve, the reality of this confrontation hit me with unexpected force. I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of our family dinner, and allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had just occurred. I had stood my ground. I had protected myself. But in doing so, I may have fractured my family irreparably. Yet as the tears came, I realized they were different from the ones I had shed a week ago. These were not tears of shock or humiliation. They were tears of mourning for what was lost, but also tears of release. The truth, however painful, had been spoken. The deception had been named. And in that naming, I had reclaimed my power and my dignity. Whatever came next would be difficult, but I would face it as the woman Franklin had loved and respected, not as anyone's fool. The days following the confrontation were among the most difficult of my life, rivaling even the dark period after Franklin's death. The house felt oppressively quiet. My phone remained silent, no calls from Maxwell or Vanessa. I had expected anger, perhaps even attempts to backpedal or manipulate further, but the complete silence was its own form of pain. Ethan called the next day as promised, his voice tight with emotion. I'm sorry, Grandma. I had no idea. I know you didn't, sweetheart, I assured him. None of this is your fault. Dad's really angry. He says you've lost your mind, that you're being influenced by your friends to turn against the family. A familiar tactic, shifting blame rather than accepting responsibility. What do you think, Ethan? A long pause. I think there's probably truth on both sides. But I found the listing for the lake house online. The down payment is exactly $50,000. My heart ached for him, forced to confront his parents' deception at such a young age. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Emma's really upset. Mom won't let her call you, but she wanted me to tell you she loves you. Tell her I love her too, more than anything. And Ethan, my door is always open to both of you no matter what. The following week, I signed the new will and trust documents at Patricia's office, officially implementing the changes I had described to Maxwell and Vanessa. Thomas helped me finalize the financial restructuring, ensuring that my grandchildren's education would be secure regardless of their parents' actions. I also continued seeing Diana, working through the complex emotions of family estrangement. Grief doesn't follow a linear path, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session. There will be good days and bad days. The important thing is that you're taking care of yourself through all of them. Taking care of myself became my focus. I joined a water aerobics class at the local community center, started volunteering at the public library, and accepted more invitations from Barbara and other friends. Slowly, the raw wound of betrayal began to scab over, not healed but no longer actively bleeding. About a month after the confrontation, I received my first communication from Maxwell, a terse email. Mom, Vanessa and I have discussed the situation. We believe you overreacted to what was clearly a misunderstanding. However, in the interest of family harmony, we're willing to move forward. We expect you'll reconsider your rash decisions regarding your will once emotions have settled. Maxwell.
No επάλεγη.
No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just an expectation that I would eventually return to my role as their personal bank. I didn't respond. Instead, I found a support group for seniors who had experienced financial exploitation by family members. The stories shared in that circle were heartbreaking but also empowering. I wasn't alone. And many of these resilient individuals had found ways to rebuild their lives and, in some cases, even their family relationships on healthier terms. Through the support group, I learned about a financial literacy program for seniors at a local community college. I not only enrolled but eventually began volunteering as a peer counselor, sharing my experience to help others recognize and avoid similar situations. Ethan continued to call regularly, and by early summer, Emma had found ways to contact me directly as well, often from friends' phones. They visited when they could, though always without their parents' knowledge. These stolen moments with my grandchildren became precious islands of joy in what sometimes felt like an ocean of loss. 3 months after the confrontation, I received another email from Maxwell, this one notably different in tone. Mom, it's been a difficult few months. Vanessa and I have been doing some serious thinking. I won't say we agree with how you've characterized our actions, but we recognize that we breached your trust. Ethan and Emma miss you terribly. Would you be open to meeting just the two of us first, perhaps at that coffee shop you like? Maxwell. I approached this outreach with cautious optimism. After consulting with Diana, I agreed to meet Maxwell the following week. The conversation was awkward, strained, but civil. Maxwell didn't exactly apologize, but he acknowledged that they had perhaps taken advantage of my generosity. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. I'm not changing my will, Maxwell, I made clear. The trusts for the children and the charitable donations stand. He nodded stiffly. I understand. It's your money. Those 4 words represented a seismic shift in our relationship. It's your money. An acknowledgement, however reluctant, of my autonomy and right to determine how my resources were used. By the 6-month mark, we had established a tentative new normal. Sunday dinners resumed, though now held at Maxwell and Vanessa's home rather than mine. The conversation carefully avoided financial topics. Vanessa was coolly polite, clearly still resentful but making an effort for the children's sake. Maxwell seemed genuinely interested in rebuilding some form of relationship, though I remained watchful for signs of the old manipulative patterns. Most importantly, my relationship with Ethan and Emma flourished. Free from the shadow of financial exploitation, we connected in more authentic ways. I attended Emma's dance performances and Ethan's academic presentations. We took weekend trips to museums and parks. I saw them blossom as they realized that love could exist without strings or expectations. As the 1-year anniversary of that fateful phone call approached, I found myself reflecting on all that had changed. The betrayal had been painful beyond words, but from that pain had come growth and unexpected gifts. I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed. I had formed new friendships and deepened existing ones. I had found purpose in helping others avoid similar situations. And somewhat surprisingly, my relationship with Maxwell was slowly healing. Not to what it had been, but perhaps to something more honest. At Emma's 18th birthday celebration, he had taken me aside and said simply, "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything." The words I had waited a year to hear, delivered without expectation or agenda. That night, as I sat on my patio watching the sunset, I felt Franklin's presence more strongly than I had in years. "We did our best with him," I said aloud. And in the end, maybe this was the wake-up call he needed. The wound would always be there, a scar on my heart. But scars tell stories of survival, of healing, of lessons learned through pain. My story wasn't one I would have chosen, but it was mine, and I had reclaimed the right to determine its ending. I had learned that it's never too late to set boundaries, to demand respect, to reshape relationships on healthier terms. That love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be exploited. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Most of all, I had learned that even in our 60s, 70s, and beyond, we remain the authors of our own lives. The final chapters can be just as meaningful, just as filled with growth and discovery, as all those that came before. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity? Or have you witnessed someone you care about being manipulated by those who should love them? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our stories is the first step toward healing. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and rewrite your story. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to face whatever challenges come your way with courage and dignity.